Feuds are what make WWE fun, especially when they involve two legends. During the mid to late 2000s, we saw the rise of guys like John Cena and Randy Orton as the company's top faces. You know who else was? The Undertaker and Batista. These two legends had one of the best rivalries of the decade. It was physical and brutal. For some reason, the company just doesn't mention it that much, and they should because it was really awesome. Let's revisit the epic rivalry between the Dead Man and the Animal. Back in 07, Taker was already a legend. No one had the same aura, mystique, and respect the Dead Man did. He had seen it all and done it all. Not only did he win titles, he delivered some amazing matches that a man his size shouldn't be able to have. The Dead Man had nothing to prove, except for one thing. He wanted to win the Royal Rumble. Meanwhile, Batista was once again the World Heavyweight Champion. In 2006, he failed to defeat the Big Show for the ECW title, and he was feuding with Booker T for the World title. But in November that year, he finally became champion once again. And at the Royal Rumble, he defended the title against Mr. Kennedy. Taker finally won his first Rumble, and he could pick a champion to face at WrestleMania. Taker wasn't feuding with anyone at the time, so he didn't know who he was going to pick. At that time, there were 3 brands and a world title for each. John Cena was the WWE Champion, Bobby Lashley was the ECW Champion, and Batista held the world title. After he won the Rumble, Taker lined up all 3 champions, and he was about to choose his next victim. Just when you thought he was about to choose John Cena, he focused on Batista, making it clear that he wanted the world title at WrestleMania. But at that point, there was no animosity between them. They had never faced each other before, so they had until WrestleMania to build up the rivalry. Batista was the one who started things, and he betrayed the Dead Man in a tag team match against John Cena and Shawn Michaels. Batista hit a spinebuster on the Dead Man before walking out, allowing John Cena and Shawn Michaels to win. They were both babyfaces. It seemed like Batista was going to be a bit more of a villain. Not only was the world title on the line, but so was the greatest streak of all time. But something bizarre happened at WrestleMania. It was the first time that his opponent wasn't afraid of the Dead Man. Batista was 6'5", and he had like 300 pounds of muscle. He was a beast, so it was believable. Batista could beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania. As soon as the bell rang, Batista showed his lack of fear when he speared The Undertaker, and he was immediately in charge. Batista, who had recently shown a more heel and aggressive side, was showered with boos, as he continued to beat up the Dead Man, who wasn't going to back down against the Phenom. But Taker gained the advantage when he took the match outside, but the champion whipped him against the barricade. He powerslammed the Dead Man against the announcer's table. Batista brought the Dead Man into the ring, because he promised to pin him. At that point, it seemed like the Dead Man had nothing left. Powered out and hit the last ride, which wasn't enough to put Batista down. The Animal countered with a spinebuster and positioned himself for a Batista bomb, only to be chokeslammed by the Dead Man, which still wasn't enough. Taker failed to hit a tombstone as Batista hit a spear on him, but that didn't keep the Undertaker down. He tried another Batista bomb, but Taker countered and evened the odds. The Animal tried his own tombstone, but Taker countered and finally hit his own, defeating Batista and winning the world title for the first time. The Dead Man was still undefeated. It was a physical contest against a fearless Animal, and Taker had finally found his match. But these two were just getting started. Batista congratulated The Undertaker after winning fair and square, but he also demanded a rematch, especially considering he could have won via countout, but chose not to. Teddy Long decided that the only way for them to settle this was in a last man standing match. The only problem for Batista was that he was injured because of Finlay. At Backlash a month after Mania, Taker quickly gained the advantage early on, and he kept striking down the Animal. He tried to end the match early with a chokeslam, only for Batista to counter and take the offensive with a clothesline. Taker used his steel stabs to his advantage, as he often bashed Batista on the head and knee to waken him enough that he wouldn't be able to answer the 10 count. Taker even tried to superplex Batista, as the Dead Man got up at 7, whereas the Animal got up at 8 before his leg gave out, so it was hard for him to stand. After a back and forth, the Undertaker thought he would finally put the Animal away by hitting him with a leg drop on the announce table, but Batista got up at 9, and the Dead Man was shocked. Taker didn't waste any time and hit Batista with a snake eyes, but he ate a spear from the Animal, but before he could go for a big boot, the Animal hit a spear. Just as Taker stood up, he ate 2 spinebusters in a row. The Dead Man stood up from the assault, and he was about to receive a 3rd spinebuster, leaving JBL and Michael Cole wondering what the hell had happened to Batista, because they'd never seen this version of the Animal. The Dead Man survived the 3rd one, and he countered a Batista bomb. Once he hit that chokeslam, it looked like it was over, but Batista got up and hit a Batista bomb that still wasn't enough. Batista was desperate and introduced a steel chair into the match, but he couldn't capitalize on it when Taker went for a tombstone, thinking that would be enough to keep him down for a 10 count. Batista got back on his feet at 9, and the two continued to brawl outside the ring. Taker went for the tombstone again. Batista escaped and hit him with a spear off the stage. A portion of the stage collapsed on both of them, and neither got up before the count of 10. The match was a draw, and the Dead Man was still the champion. Another excellent match from the two, but their feud was far from over. SmackDown general manager Teddy Long wanted them to fight inside a steel cage, and that's exactly what happened. Taker used strikes to wear down Batista. Throughout the match, Taker focused on Batista's injured leg, but even though Dave was a heel, he showed a lot of heart and fought through the pain. He was pushing Taker to his limit. When Batista tried to escape, Taker hit him with a last ride, but that still wasn't enough. The Dead Man tried to escape through the door, only for Batista to pull him back in. The two climbed the cage hoping to escape, but Batista knocked Taker down to the mat, and just when he was about to leave, Taker set up and quickly climbed the cage and tried to escape again. They landed on the floor simultaneously, and the match was a draw. But as soon as the steel cage was raised, the Dead Man was attacked by Mark Henry, even though he had just gone through hell to retain his title. He destroyed the Dead Man allowing Edge to take advantage. Edge had stole the Money in the Bank briefcase from Mr. Kennedy, and just 4 days later, the Ultimate Opportunist lived up to his name. He speared the dead man and became the new world champion. With Edge now being in the mix, things got interesting. It was no longer just two behemoths fighting. A smart villain was the new world champion. The feud between the dead man and the ending didn't have a proper ending because the last two matches ended up in a draw. But with Taker out of action, Batista focused on Edge, starting a rivalry between them. Batista struggled against Edge. He lost at Judgment Day inside a steel cage, and he also lost on Vengeance on a last chance match, which meant he could no longer challenge Edge for his world title. But then Edge was injured and had to relinquish the title. Then the Great Khali won the Battle Royal and became world champion, starting a feud with the Animal. While Batista couldn't win the title at SummerSlam because Khali disqualified himself, the Animal finally won the belt at Unforgiven when he defeated the Great Khali and Rey Mysterio. After failing 8 times in a row, Batista was once again the world champion, but he was now the dead man's target. Taker had been feuding with Mark Henry, but now he wanted to regain the title that he never lost. The rivalry was back on. The match happened on Cyber Sunday, and Stone Cold was a special guest referee. Batista had the advantage, since he was the hometown favorite and the match took place in Washington, D.C. Unlike the months prior, Batista was the babyface that night. The Animal came out swinging, but this time Taker was prepared, and he didn't allow Batista to take the early advantage. Even though their previous 2 matches were a draw, Taker knew that he could beat Batista fair and square, because that's what happened at WrestleMania. But don't forget Stone Cold. He was a wild card, and he had a long history with the dead man, that tracing back to the Attitude Era. During the match, the dead man focused on Batista's left shoulder. For the most part, Batista had the advantage. He had never defeated the dead man, and that was his priority. Not only because he wanted to retain the title, but to prove that he could do it. Still, The Undertaker seemed to have the advantage, when he pulled out power move after power move to try to take Batista away. The pace of this match was more methodical and favored the dead man. At one point, Batista thought the dead man had his number, because he kept countering all of his moves, including a spear that hurt his left arm even more. Somehow, Batista countered old school into a spinebuster, but when everyone thought he was about to win, the dead man countered with a Hell's Gate. It looked like Batista was about to fade, but he rolled into a pinfall and forced Taker to break the hold. The dead man countered Batista's moves to go for a chokeslam before attempting a tombstone, but then Batista countered into a spear and set Taker up for his finishing move before Taker countered. But Taker fought out of it and eventually hit a last ride that still couldn't put Batista away. He went for the tombstone, but the Animal countered with a spinebuster, and then the dead man rolls up. Batista was in shock because he had no idea how he was going to win. He hit a Batista bomb, which still wasn't enough. But when he nailed the dead man with a second Batista bomb, Batista finally proved that he could beat the dead man. Taker was tough, but the Animal retained the title as the dead man looked on in fury, knowing this wasn't the end. The score was 1-1. So now, it was time for a rubber match. In what seemed like the final chapter, Taker challenged Batista inside Hell in a Cell, the structure he made famous. Batista may have been able to take The Undertaker to the limit, but that wasn't a last man standing match and inside a steel cage. Hell in a Cell was different. It was The Undertaker's playground. He was afraid the person coming out of the structure wouldn't be the same who entered. Batista had to change his approach, because he knew that the more the match went on, the more it favored the dead man. Batista had the early advantage, but then in a brutal and innovative move, he wrapped the chair around Batista's neck and slammed it against the steps. Batista was coughing up blood, but he didn't give up. Taker busted Batista's head open, making it clear this was his element, and now Batista's. When Taker locked into Hell's Gate, everyone thought that would be enough, because of Batista's injured throat. But when the Animal made his way to the ropes, the referee forced the dead man to break the hold, even though there's no disqualifications inside Hell in a Cell. Despite that, The Undertaker continued, but Batista found a way to counter. He slammed Taker's head against the steps, busting his head open as well. Both men were now bruised and bloody, and the Animal smelled the blood. Man in Black was Edge, who never lost the title and was forced to relinquish it. He entered Hell in a Cell with a camera and nailed the dead man with it. He then placed Taker's head on the steps and slammed it with a chair. He then dragged Batista's lifeless body on top of the dead man, allowing the Animal to retain. It was the only controversial match finish in their feud. Batista was up 2-1, and the controversial finish was the company's way of protecting the dead man, who couldn't just lose twice in a row. It also allowed Edge to join the rivalry. A month later, they had a 3-way, and Edge won the title at Armageddon. 2 months later, it was time for the Elimination Chamber, who would determine the #1 contender to Edge's world title at WrestleMania 24. The final 2 in the match was the dead man and the Animal. The dead man won and punched his ticket to WrestleMania, where not only did he beat Edge for the world title, but he remained undefeated. Then Batista and the dead man faced each other a few times. In April of 2008, they fought on SmackDown, but the result was a double countout. A week later, they fought again for the world title, but it wasn't the same as their matches in 2007. In a no disqualification match, Taker tried to end Batista with a tombstone on the steps, but the Animal countered, and he had a spinebuster on the steel steps. It looked like Batista was about to win, as he positioned the dead man for a Batista bomb, but Shawn Michaels appeared out of nowhere, hitting Batista with a super kick. Taker took advantage and finished the match with a tombstone. They were now 2-2, but the last 2 were controversial. Taker's win allowed him to retain the title, but it still protected the Animal, but their score still needed to be settled, and it was over a year for that to happen. At the 2009 edition of Bragging Rights, the dead man defended the world title in a 3-way against Batista and Rey Mysterio. The match was short. It was over in less than 10 minutes, and the dead man retained. 2 months later, it was the Rivalry's final chapter, a chair match for the world title at TLC. Batista, who was now a full-on heel, won by hitting The Undertaker with a low blow. But hold on, player. Teddy Long came out, and the match was restarted. As soon as the bell rang again, the dead man sat up and countered a chair attack from Batista, with the chair bouncing off Batista's head. Taker found an opening to brutalize him with a chair, before hitting a tombstone to retain. Their legendary feud was finally over. Taker won the rubber match, and the 3-2 scorecard protected his legacy, while solidifying Batista as a top heel. This feud defined what 07 was all about, brutal physicality. But their last two matches weren't the same as the previous ones, and they lacked intensity. Obviously, both of them put their bodies on the line that year, and gave everything they had, in one of the best rivalries of their time. So you can understand, Batista's career didn't have the same stellar ending that The Undertaker had, but there's no arguing that he pushed the dead man to the limit during their rivalry. If we're talking pure physicality, we haven't seen a WWE rivalry like this in years.